For that.
No problem. So I'm gonna
being here. Thank you everybody for being here. My name is Antonio Serrano. I am the Assistant Director of Outreach and Recruitment for The Ohio State University and a proud member of the Southern Association for Colleges Admissions Counselors, which is our SACAC regional organization. And so we're glad to be here with you.
Hi, my name is Starr and I'm the college admissions coach for Elevation Scholars. Elevation Scholars is a nonprofit CBO organization that works specifically with high-need, high-achieving high school students in the Orlando, Florida area. And I am incredibly excited to be here tonight to talk to your parents about how to support your student in their senior year. So just a quick overview of what we'll talk about tonight. We'll talk about timeline and some checklists to keep in mind as you're going through this journey. It is October. And so originally before, when we originally had this scheduled, it was September. And so you had plenty of time. Then Hurricane Ian decided to show up and we had to postpone. So I hope all of you are doing okay after that. But we want to talk about college fit. It's never too late to make sure that you discuss college fit and what that looks like and what that means. And then the partnership between your parent and their student as they go through this, understanding the FAFSA, very brief explanation for that. And then any questions that you may have, again, please feel free to post those in the Q&A section, or if it's personal, you can put it in the chat.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and start off by just kind of outlining the timeline and checklist, okay? Now, this is not something that should have been held off until senior year. And so if you're waiting to your senior year to start this, you're a little bit late to the game, but you could still be a winner because there is still time to kind of have a really successful application process. And so we're gonna start off by just talking about who is going to be the support for the student in their college search journey, okay? And this should be a collaboration from several different entities. Of course, the family, parents, and the students should be a partnership in this, but you also want to reach out to your high school guidance counselors. They're going to be a huge advocate for you and a resource. They're going to be the ones to send transcripts, write recommendation letters, and really help you with those processes within the high school part of it. But also using friends, siblings that might have went to school before you, or reaching out to friends who have college degrees who can share their experience. Maybe there's a mentor, maybe it's a religious pastor or priest or someone from your synagogue. These are all people who will be glad to help you in this journey. And so this shouldn't all be put on the student. It's a lot. Senior year is very stressful. High school is very stressful. And so the college search process should be a team effort. So just keep that in mind, that we should all be in this together working with our students. The next part is really building out your college list. So hopefully, if you do have a senior that is in high school now, that they have a list forming, okay? If they don't, we really want to start getting on that pretty fast, because we're coming up to that November 1st deadline, which is a really important deadline across the United States for early action. But building your college list, what is that going to look like, and where do you begin to build a college list? So what I like to tell students is that as they start thinking about the different types of schools that they want to consider, they should always consider safety, target, and reach schools. Now, in my experience as an admissions counselor, working with young people for over 20 years in this process, I often find a lot of students going for a lot of reach schools, right? They hear of all these great institutions that are out there, and they're going for the top institutions in the US because it's what their friends are talking about, it's what they see on TV, it's kind of the thing that's in their worldview. And that's great to have some of those reach schools, but know that they will be reached, which means they're going to be harder to get into and most likely have less funding to go towards those educations. So reach schools should be a part of that list, but there should also be what we call target schools. And a target school is going to really fit that student's academic profile. One way we determine what's a safety target or reach school is by utilizing the college's or the university's website, finding out what the middle 50% is test score range, whether that's SAT or ACT, or perhaps looking at what the average grade point average is, or if they're looking at class rank, what is the percentile from high schools that are being accepted predominantly into those schools. Those should be great factors to use in creating your lists of safety, target, and reach schools. So those target schools should be where a student fits right in the middle 50% on averages of SAT or ACT. They fall into the percentile of ranking that the schools are looking for if they provide that, or they have the minimum or higher of the GPA that the schools are looking for. And safety schools are going to be those schools where you are far above what that middle 50% is. You're most likely going to get accepted and probably will get scholarship from those schools. That would be a really nice way to round out a college list. A lot of families like to use US News and World Report's rankings for, finding it, but there are other avenues you can use as well. Colleges That Change Lives is a great resource to look for at different smaller colleges that may not have a lot of national attention, but might fit the needs of your young person. And so utilize lots of avenues to probably just discover new colleges that might not have been in your worldview, but that might be a great fit for your sons or daughters.
There are, and to piggyback off the idea of the resources, there's a wonderful app that I was introduced to this summer called Lopper, L-O-P-E-R, and it will expose you to colleges without exposing you to the college name, so that you're solely looking at the characteristics that you're looking for in those schools. So as you're going through and we're talking about continuing to do your research, several places where you can get information about institutions, college fairs, the reps are, COVID is coming down, so reps are starting to go back into the schools. So reach out to them. If they don't necessarily come to your school, you can reach out to the college rep for your area, and all of that information is located on the school's website. So feel free to do that. Your high school counselor is going to be an amazing resource. A lot of school districts now also have college and career coaches or counselors within the school. So then you have your school counselor, but then you also have your college and career coach. And so that individual is also a really great resource for you as well. They're going to be working with you specifically on life after high school. And so between the two, college, career, or a combination of the two, they're going to be good resources. And then visiting college campuses. I cannot overstate the importance and the value of going onto a college campus. Even if it's not the college campus that you want to ultimately go to. So for instance, I live in Beaufort, South Carolina. The closest campus to me would be the University of South Carolina at Beaufort. It's in Bluffton. It's a beautiful campus. My children probably will not go there because they've been in the small town their whole life. They don't want to continue staying in the small town. But if I wanted to show them a small liberal arts university, I could take them to that campus, show them around, and say, this is what a small school feels like. So then if they're looking at smaller institutions in other locations across the US, they know, okay, I've been to a small campus. I know the vibe of that campus. Am I looking for a school similar to that? So they have a frame of reference. So that's visiting campuses is a very, very valuable experience for the student, but also for the parents to have an opportunity to step foot on campus. And then money is always important, right? And there are scholarships that are out there. And so how do you search for those scholarships? And so one of the biggest funders for students' education is going to be the institution themselves. And so first seek out what scholarships, grants are available within that institution, within the school department that your student is looking into majoring, or just in the admissions office itself. And then also from there, you have the federal government. So completing your FAFSA, CSS profile, all of those things. And then the free money, the institutional, the community civic organization scholarships that you're going to be, that are maybe available through your church or through the Lions Club, through the Koalas, just any organization that may be in your community that's going to be giving scholarships out to students. And right here we have this is not all encompassing, but some really good resources for you in reference to places where you can search for scholarships in your area.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment also just to go back to the researching of schools.
Mhm.
I can tell you right now, as the Ohio State University, we are on the road right now. As that November 1 time comes up where we can, it's that early action deadline. Me and my colleagues from institutions all over the United States and around the world are doing college fairs right now. We're visiting high schools. So this is going to be an opportunity for your sons, daughters to really come out and meet the admissions people who, one, will be their advocate for them to get into our schools, but also give them all the information they need to be successful applicants, right? Whether or not to use a test score, when to apply by, what special programs do we have available that might fit their academic needs? What scholarship opportunities do we have at our specific institutions that might bridge that gap where they might be lacking from either home resources or how they're thinking about funding those opportunities? And also keep in mind, whether you're looking for an in-state institution or an out-of-state institution, a private school or a public school, everybody's going to have different setup of scholarship matrix. So it's really important to get it firsthand from reps like myself who are out there ready to assist you in this process.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Okay.
So yeah, let's continue on with this timeline because senior year is now, right? And our students are taking classes. I will say for a lot of competitive universities, we're going to be looking for the first and foremost that we look for. And I get this question all the time at college fairs or when I'm talking to a family, what do you look for in an applicant? Okay. I can tell you the number one thing that all of us are looking for as universities is the performance in high school. One, we're looking for grade trends. So we want to see if a student is maintaining, a grade level that is competitive. We want to see that they're challenging themselves with rigorous courses. And so we will predominantly look at a school profile to find out what's offered to a student and then use that as a frame of reference to see, okay, was it IB, AP, dual enrollment, ACE Cambridge courses? Those sort of more advanced college preparation courses is what a lot of competitive schools are looking for. And so if you know that you don't have those types of courses, then that's going back to when you're building your list. Okay, is this going to be a reach school for me? Since I didn't go through one of those advanced college prep curriculums, maybe I'm reaching too high for this institution when they're looking for those AP level students, but they will be a fit for you. So really look at your academic portfolio and your transcripts and use that as a frame of reference as well. As you start applying for schools, you're going to come up with a whole bunch of different deadlines. There's early decision, early action, regular decision, and rolling. It's really important to know those deadlines for all the schools that you're considering, because a lot of those deadlines are tied to something. Maybe it's tied to a competitive major that you want to get into. Maybe it's tied to an honors program or possibly even merit scholarships. So really important, again, to know those deadlines as you start the application process.
So we've made it through the application process, we've submitted, and so now we get to the point where it's decision time. So fast forward a little bit to May 1 is our National Decision Day. And before you get to that point, you're going to have a lot of different things that are going to take place. One being financial aid award letters that you'll be receiving. Those financial aid award letters are going to give you a breakdown of everything that you're being offered from the institution, from the federal government. If you submit information about scholarships you've received, that'll be on there as well. And then any loans that you may qualify for. And so all of that information is available. And I encourage you to create a spreadsheet. One of the things I do with our students is we have spreadsheets galore, but one of them is a spreadsheet for comparing their award letters so that you are comparing apples to apples. Because sometimes that raw number that you see on University XYZ versus ABC College may look like ABC College is more affordable, but when we break it down, the money that actually has to come out of pocket may be very different. And so, and we also want to, you want to take into consideration those non-indirect school charges like transportation and books and things like that when it comes to your award letter. So the three things that you basically want to take into consideration is making sure that the school that you choose ultimately has the best academic, social, and financial fit for you. And so after that, once you've made your selection, you're going to talk about, look up for your orientation days. Usually take place during the summertime, and some schools have transitioned to doing them virtually. A lot of schools still do it on face-to-face. You come on campus and you get an opportunity to be a college student for a weekend, get acclimated, figure out what life may be like once you get there. Housing deadlines are super important, especially with the increasing of students wanting to attend university. The earlier you're able to get those fees in, the better to secure your housing. And then final transcript submission. School counselors are usually really good about making sure that your final transcript gets sent to your school. But if there's a process at your school, if they require some sort of indication on how you submit those, make sure you're following your school's process. And then any APIB or dual enrollment credit that you may request to be given credit for at the college level, make sure that you follow the processes for those as well.
I just wanted to also let you guys know that I put in the chat, the Department of Education offers a unique tool called the Net Price Calculator. And it's a great opportunity for families, once they get their financial aid award letters, to really sit down and compare the costs for each of the institutions that you've been admitted to and that receive those financial aid award letters. So you can make the best informed decision on what's going to be the best financial fit for the family in regards to this next journey of higher education.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we want to talk a little bit about college fit, because a lot of times what I see is students are applying to the schools that their friend is applying to, or they're applying to a school that maybe a sibling applied to, but not every school is going to fit the personality, fit the academic profile, or financially fit the student's profile. So really, when you're looking at the academic profile for a student and the college fit triangle here, you really want to have all these three things line up for the student as an individual. And so when we talk about academic fit, of course, that's going to mean, does the school have your major that you're considering? And if you're a student who might be exploratory or undecided, are you choosing a school with a robust enough academic offerings that once you do decide, you're not going to have to transfer to a new institution, but there should be something that is found at that school that you're looking at. And so academic fit is really important. If you know you want to go into the health sciences, or if you want to get into engineering or agricultural sciences or veterinary medicine, choose a school and a launching pad that will have the best academic fit for you there. Next, we have financial fit. Financial fit is obviously a big factor. It's the most important factor when you're deciding on where to go to school for a lot of families. You have to think about this as an investment, right? Just as you invest in a home or invest in life insurance, you're investing in the future of your young person here. So finding the right financial fit is critical. Scholarships, grants, all those things are great. That's all free money, but we know that loans is not always free money. And so we want to use loans when appropriate, but you also want to be cautious that it doesn't outweigh the return on investment there. All right. So be strategic with that and really look for that financial fit for an institution. And then lastly, you want to consider the social fit or the character of the university. Every school is going to have its own character and its own personality. And so as a young person, have them go and visit these schools. If your student is more into sports and athletics, if your student's more musically inclined or theatrically inclined, more science inclined, there are going to be schools that kind of fit that profile. Have a student go, they can see students that look like themselves, that they can see themselves having friends there, that they can call a home away from home at this institution. So the social part of it is equally as important as the academic and the financial fit when we're talking about the college fit triangle.
Mhm. And one of the things that I will share in talking about college fit, one of the experiences that I had, I'm a first generation college student. And so going through this process of um, college at the application process, I knew nothing. Like I was doing it all on my own. And I remember having a conversation with my mom, and she told me that um, we couldn't afford to go and visit a bunch of colleges. So she said, once you get accepted, you'll go and visit. And so I got accepted to a small Christian school in Tennessee. Shout out to anybody who knows King University in Bristol, Tennessee. I love my alma mater. But if I had to go back, I would have done my research and I would have really advocated for a visit because coming from South Carolina, I had no idea how to drive in the snow. I hadn't seen snow since I was a tiny, tiny child. So all of those things, the weather, the location, the feel of the campus, all of those things I wish I had someone like Antonio share with me that these things were important, so that I could have probably I might have made a different choice. So I say all of that to advocate for families to go on college visits now, so that even after your student has put in their application, a college visit is still worth the time, because they'll at least know whether or not, if I get accepted to this institution, do I see myself here? And that's really, really important.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if you don't have the resources to travel around the country, if you're looking at out-of-state institutions, there are a lot of virtual options. If one thing good came out of COVID is that we really harnessed the use of technology and we utilized it. We had to make do with what we had. And so our virtual tours are a great way to get an idea of what the campus is like. And a lot of our institutions will have programs for when students are admitted, that they'll have large-scale recruitment events. I know for like Ohio State, we offer travel vouchers for families who are coming from out of state who may not have an added opportunity to come to visit campus. So we are really pushing college fit. It's equally as important for us as institutions to make sure that we're a good fit for the student, so we can, maintain our retention numbers and make sure we're graduating students within 4 years. So, one of the worst things for us to do is just admit students and they're not happy at our schools. So we really want to make sure that not only do we fit their academic needs, but we're also meeting their financial needs and that we're the right fit socially for them. So another really important thing to consider, that it's equally as important for the university as well. But virtual opportunities are out there in the time being, if getting to our campuses is a little bit of a challenge.
So the parent-student team, this is, again, I cannot emphasize how important this match is going to be for your student, not only for them to feel supported, but for you as a parent to feel informed about what's going on in the process. So if you're able to identify the priorities of what you're looking for your child, you know your child best. They might not appreciate that fact right now, but you know your child best. And so helping them to identify those things about themselves that you know are going to be important as they grow and manifest themselves into functioning adults. So identify your priorities for your colleges. Utilize and lean into your wisdom and your experience as a parent. This is also for those first-gen students. If you're a parent who did not have the opportunity to go into college as a traditional college student, or maybe you just haven't gone to college at all, that doesn't mean that you have nothing to offer to your student. You have a lot of things to offer. You know what it's like to go into and to be new in a place. You know what it feels like to start a new job. And college is much like that. And so offering that wisdom and that experience to your student is going to be valuable to them. Allow your student to take ownership of their experience. I cannot emphasize, even as a college admissions coach, it is so important for me to help the student to facilitate what their college application experience is. It is not my job to take it over, to tell them what schools they're going to apply to. Even if I may feel like a certain institution is going to be a better fit for the ones that they have on their list, I can suggest. But ultimately, it's going to be the student who has to have that experience. And so allowing the student to have some ownership of this college application process. And then don't be afraid. Please, parents, don't be afraid to talk about money. Money can be a very uncomfortable conversation. It brings me anxiety, and I've been through this, and I have 2 degrees. So finances, talking about loans, talking about where you are. Do you have savings for your student to go to college? Are you able to qualify for a Parent Plus loan if that's necessary? Letting your student know on the front end will save lots of heartache and sorrow on the back end. You don't want your child to get their heart set on going to their dream institution. Their dream institution accepts them, and then at the end of the day, we don't have the money to pay for it. Because that can be very demoralizing for you as a parent, but also for the student. And so we want to make sure that if we put everything out in the forefront, it's not going to be a stress-free process, but it'll be a stress-less process. There are going to be things that come up. There are going to be deadlines that you miss. This is your first time going through something that's this intense. It is okay. You are able to control what you can control. And then for the small things, just let it go. Just let it go. Help your students to understand that you can control what you can control. There are anxieties that are going to come up. There are going to be times when your student is going to feel really, really inadequate, or even an imposter-like syndrome. Like, do I really feel like, am I really good enough to get into this place? As a parent, be that mama bear, be that papa bear, be that person that they can lean on and express to you their insecurities so that they can get it out into the open, and maybe even help them to use some of those concerns as a way to generate some ideas for their college essays. Put in the work, put in the work, put in the work. The harder the student is able to, the more the student is able to get done now, the better that they're going to feel, the more secure, the more confident they're going to feel in their applications. Procrastination is not good when it comes to college essays or when it comes to college applications. Inevitably, systems go down, the internet will break, Murphy's Law will happen. So if you are working on an application, I will tell you save, save, save in multiple places. And I will also encourage you that as you are working, don't allow your student to wait till the last minute to submit their applications, because like I said, Murphy's Law is real. And then at the end of it all, parents, grace yourself. You do not have to know the answer to every single question that comes up. This is why we want, and we're encouraging you to have a support system. You have your school counselor, your child's high school counselor, you have their college and career coach. You may have a college counselor at your school if your child is at a private school. You have admissions reps that are willing to help you. And side note, I had an admissions rep tell me that a student could call them and ask them about the application, and I thought that they were joking. They are so serious. When they offer their services to you, yeah, I'll look over your application and they're not going to tell you exactly, but they'll give you some pointers to make your application stronger. But you've got to put in the work beforehand and give them real things to review. But brace yourself. You've got a support system of people around you, whether you know it or not, who are willing to help. You've got great teachers out there, I'm sure, administrators, people in your community who have been through the college process, and who are willing to help. And students, brace yourselves. It's okay not to know. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses. Your friends are going to tell you that they got accepted to X, Y, and Z college and they got $100,000 in scholarships. Don't allow for yourself to get caught up in what may not even be real. Okay, this is your personal experience, and whatever happens, you're going to end up at the institution where you're meant to be.
All right, so let's talk about the money, because this is where parents really play a big role in the college search process. So October 1st was a big day for financial aid. That is when the federal government opened up their FAFSA form, which is the free application for federal student aid. And so if you haven't had the opportunity to log in to fafsa.gov and start working on that application platform, I would encourage you to get on that. Your sons and daughters are right now busy trying to write their college essays, do their supplementals, and probably make some deadlines that are coming up in the next week or so. So give them a hand in the process. You know, this is something that's going to come from your tax returns of the prior year. And so if you could help them with that process, that would be a huge benefit. But the FAFSA is going to allow the federal government to let the schools know where you stand financially as it compares to the cost of the institutions that you're looking at. It also allows the institutions to allocate monies, whether it's from our need-based resources institutionally or through the federal government or even state-funded programs. And so really want to get into that FAFSA anywhere from October 1st through February 1st is where you really want to be. February 1st is a very important deadline for a lot of institutions as their priority. The reason being is that in a few short weeks after February 1st, we're going to start issuing out our financial aid packages. All right. And so if you're getting your acceptance letters, you really want to be able to get that first round or second round of financial aid letters so that you can have a clear picture of what your options are, because there are those deadlines looming. May 1st will be coming around the corner. Your sons and daughters are going to be graduating. You're going to have to come up with a decision. So the sooner you can get your FAFSA done, the sooner our institutions will be allowed to get those financial aid award letters to you, so you know what the cost would be and the bottom lines are. Starr, do you have anything to add to that for FAFSA?
No. So we did have a question that came up. What if we don't have recent tax returns? Recent as in what year? Like they're going to be requesting for prior year. So they're going to be looking at the 2020 taxes, not 2021. So if you don't have tax returns because you don't file taxes, what will happen is that you can go and request a letter from the federal government stating that you did not file taxes. And then I believe you can submit that to the school. Correct me if I'm wrong, Antonio, and that will, and they'll be able to help you from there. It's going to be school specific as to how any additional forms that they may request from you. But you can still apply through the FAFSA even if you have not filed taxes for the 2020 federal tax year.
Yeah, and they also allow you to use estimates when you're first initially filing for the FAFSA, and then they will ask for verification later on. And so I know for Ohio State, we will send letters to parents and students for verification of certain things. So you have to work with each individual school and their financial aid office to find out what their process is for that.
Mm-hmm. And the deadline for the FAFSA, so the federal government does not have a deadline per se. Each institution is going to have a FAFSA priority deadline. So like Antonio stated before, a lot of schools, it's February 1st. In Florida, it's a little different. I think it's December 1, they require for all that information to be in. So each institution or each state is going to be a little different. And so I encourage you to look at the individual institutions where your child is applying and see when their priority deadline is. And they make that pretty prominent on their financial aid page.
And keep in mind, priority deadline is not definitive. So even though our priority deadline might be February 1st, we will still have families and students filing FAFSA well beyond that deadline. The reason why we ask for that priority deadline is so that we can be as competitive as possible with our financial aid packages and get it out sooner than later. We know that's an important part of the decision-making factor, so we want to give it in a timely manner. But if it happens to go past it, that the priority deadline doesn't mean that it's over for you. So we will have students who file much past that, and they'll just have to get the financial aid packages once we can put them together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions? So kind of as a wrap up, one of the things that I want to share as someone who's on this side of the college admissions process, so I'm working with students who are filling out those applications. Creating a good college list is important. And so as a parent, I want to give you some concrete numbers to help you. Statistically, 10 to 12 schools is going to be around about a good number. And so as your student is developing their college list, if they have more than 12 schools, quite honestly, it's going to be really overwhelming for them because schools typically, their college applications are going to have supplemental essays. And so those supplemental essays, it's not really the application, it's writing those essays that gets to be a lot. So, and then keep in mind that then you have to submit financial aid forms to each individual school once those applications are submitted. And so it's simply for the purpose of tracking that information, 10 to 12 schools is really good. And within that, when we're talking about reach, target, and safety schools, you want to focus in on those reach and match schools, those reach and target schools. Some students will, for fear, put more safety schools, or for ambition, put tons of reach schools. And so finding a nice balance, I usually work with my students and I tell them it's usually 4, 4, and 2. If you're doing 10, if they decide they want to do 12, then I say 5, 4, and 3. And so that gives them some really good wiggle room. They can find some really good schools that match them and that, you know, are above those match, so a little bit reach. And then we may have 1 or 2 dream schools that are their very, very reach schools on the list. But just concretely, we have students out here, and I know you see the stories that come out every year where students applied to 57 schools and they got scholarships to all of them and they got accepted to all of them. That's really great. And I won't diminish the accomplishments that those students have had, but I think it's really important for the student, and also it shows to the admissions counselors and the admissions officers who are reading those applications when a student has really been able to do the research and really can talk to why a certain institution is important to them. Okay, so for the 2023-24 FAFSA form uses the 2021 tax information, not 2020, correct? Yes, that is correct. I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. Antonio, do you have anything that you would add from your end, some of the kind of things that you would encourage parents to talk to their students about in reference to no-nos or some tips on what to do and what not to do on their applications?
So, I mean, the application process, it becomes hard when there's a lot of schools on there because there's so many different nuances that each school is looking at. But just be an extra set of eyes, you know, if your student is willing to share what they wrote in their essays, ask to look at them, ask to review them for them. One of the biggest things that we see are small typos and, you know, just they didn't have extra eyes reading their essays, but ask to be a positive critique on it and give constructive feedback. That's always helpful. But the other thing I think is really important is that there are things to be done after the applications are submitted. And so a lot of times students will submit all their applications and then they kind of like wipe their hands. They think they're done. They just have to wait. In that time, while they're waiting for their decisions, they could be applying for additional scholarship programs. I know at Ohio State, we have a specific scholarship program that we use called Scholarship Universe. And that's where students who are still waiting on decisions can go in and apply for, you know, endowed scholarships or vetted scholarships that Ohio State has kind of approved. And so they should be kind of trying to work behind the scenes to find out, okay, now that I have my applications in, what else can I be doing to, one, express my interest in the university, 2, to figure out how I'm going to finance or get supplemental funds for this. A lot of times, alumni associations for specific institutions are great resources as far as providing additional funding. And so if you have a local chapter of an alumni chapter for the schools that you're applying to, reach out to the alumni network. They have alumni scholarships. They offer all sorts of great benefits for students, and just as a resource to get them connected with the alumni base. So those are all great things that you can encourage your students to do while they're waiting for those decisions to come out. Now, some of the decisions they may get, obviously we all know the admit and the deny decision, but a lot of decisions might come out where it's defer. And I kind of want to just explain what that means in the sense, because one side of my job is to promote the university and to try to find students that fit our academic profile, fit our social profile, and that, you know, can find their way up to OSU. But another part of our job is to, you know, make sure that students are connected and are connected to those resources. So once they get a defer decision, if they get a defer decision, it's because we're also trying to manage our enrollment. A lot of our institutions get thousands and thousands of applicants. And so typically the first round of decisions that go out are those really high achieving applicants who we want to, you know, give them their offer. Now, you know that students are applying to more than one university, sometimes, you know, as high as 50, that Starr says, right? And so as part of an enrollment management side of things, we try to, you know, steadily put out those decisions so that we can manage our enrollment. We are looking for a target number to bring in for our class. And sometimes a deferment just means we have to hold off on your acceptance or denial to see from who we admitted already, who's going to accept that offer. So those are just some of the decisions you might encounter as you start getting back some of those decisions from colleges. It could be admit, could be deny, could be defer, or it could be waitlist. And so all of them have a specific reason. If you have any questions about those specific decisions, you would want to just reach out to the institution and find out what the implications are for that specific school.
Any other questions? So I did want to answer a question that had come through. Attendee has asked what's the difference between applying for the FAFSA, for the student applying for the FAFSA and for the student or versus the parent applying for the FAFSA. And so I just wanted to, in addition to writing their response, I wanted to also verbally say it. For a student, applying to a school, for the financial information to be attached to their application, the FAFSA form has to be in their name. The FAFSA will ask for parent income and asset information because especially if the student is a dependent. However, the actual FAFSA has to be completed in the name of the student because it is the student's responsibility. And once that child graduates, turns 18 and enters that college campus, they are an adult. And so even though they're your dependent in the eyes of the federal government and in the eyes of that institution, they are an adult. And so then at that point, all of the bills for the institutional cost is going to come in their name. So the FAFSA has to be attached to the child. The parent and the student will need to have an FSA ID in order to electronically sign the FAFSA. So the parent will still be connected to the FAFSA in that way, especially, like I said, especially if the student is a dependent. But if a parent completes a FAFSA form in the parent's name, it will not be connected to that student.
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up, Starr.
You mentioned that after you apply, you have to send FAFSA information. Yes, Ms. Connie, you do. So there are going to be verification information that will need to be sent on behalf in order to verify that the information that you have placed on the FAFSA aligns with your current status. And so the best example I can use is because they're using the 2021 tax information for the 2020 23-24 school year, there may be some changes in your life that occur. Maybe you won the lottery and you don't need as much financial assistance, or unfortunately, maybe someone got hurt and they can no longer work, and so your income diminishes. All of those things can be communicated and need to be communicated to the institution so that they can then adjust the financial aid that's given to the student. And so your school, once your application is completed and your student creates their profile or their portal for the individual institution, then the school will request the information that they may need. So for instance, if they're a CSS school where they utilize the CSS profile, then they're going to need information from the parents in addition to the students. If you are a divorced couple, they may require for the non-custodial parent to complete a CSS profile as well, communicating the income that they have. And so all of that will be detailed in the school's portal that the student creates once the application is submitted. All right.
So we have some great questions coming through the Q&A. We did type some of them out, so we weren't talking about them, but if you have any other questions that are college related from the eyes of an admissions counselor or from a college prep counselor, please let us know.
And just for your, I'll put my information, my contact information in the chat so that you all will have that. If you have any questions that come up between now and, maybe later on tonight or tomorrow or next week, for instance, feel free to reach out to me via email. That's probably going to be the best way to get in contact with me. Again, I work for a CBO, and so I'm all about educational access. Okay. Miss, I'm going to butcher this name. I'm sorry. Someone's asked, does the FAFSA need to be filled out every year? Yes. Financial information, every year it will need to be completed. Even if your student has a full ride scholarship, your institution is going to ask for that information every year. So just get ready. Once your kid goes into school, October 1, just go on ahead and put that in your calendar, put it in your phone. October 1, the FAFSA will open. We have a question. Okay. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Antonio.
Another question is about the ACT. So if your child has not taken an ACT yet, it does not have an effect on the FAFSA at all. FAFSA is strictly financial, but depending on the school that the students are applying to, it may or may not have an impact on their application. So a lot of schools are test optional. Some schools are test blind, and some schools will require an SAT or an ACT. So you just need to find out which institutions your sons or daughters are applying to, whether or not a test score is required. If it is required, then you will have to kind of work with schools that, maybe you don't miss the deadline. ACT, SAT should really be started to be taken in the junior year in high school. And so that way you have several times that you can take it to see, you can retake the test and see if you can get a better score. But waiting till late in your senior year to take an ACT or an SAT may make you miss some important deadlines. So you might want to look for schools that are test optional or test blind in that matter.
Absolutely. And I will, so schools, just as an FYI, schools will take both ACT or SAT. So I encourage my students who are early on in the process to take both. A lot of schools will offer one or the other during the school year, during their junior year, so students at least have one score. And so I would, if you don't know if your school offers your students a free test, I would look into that. And so they have the SAT or the ACT. If it is an ACT test optional, why wouldn't you want to submit your score to the school? That's a really great question. And so I'm going to let the college admissions rep answer that because I have my own personal view, but I'm going to let the professional who's reviewing it tell you that.
Yeah, if a school is test optional, okay, so a lot of schools have, it's very unique to schools. So my answer is a generalization, but is the best one I can give to kind of sum it all up. So each of our institutions have a middle 50% test score, okay? And so I'll give you an example for Ohio State. Our middle 50% is a 1330 SAT to a 1460, or on the ACT is a 28 to a 32, right? That's our middle 50%. If a student has an ACT of a 25, that clearly isn't in our middle 50%. Now, no institution wants that middle 50% number to start to trend down. Okay. And so if they submit a score, if we're an optional school, right, and they submit a score that's 25, that's part of our review. And so we will use that score, and that could be a score that would get them denied to our institution. Okay. If the student chooses to go test optional, right? So they say, okay, I'm not going to use a test score. So we don't have that score. We don't have to report a score. It won't bring our averages down. We can look at other factors in the student's application profile. It could be course rigor. It could be diversity. It could be all sorts of things that we're looking for in order to shape our class without that number of a test score to reduce the averages of our institutions. And so if a school is giving you the option, it is not detrimental to not send in the score. It is to your benefit, right? Especially if you don't have a score that is falling into that middle 50%. Now, if you have an ACT that fits into the middle 50%, say if the middle 50% is 28 to 32 and you have a 29 or a 30, that would be a score that I would recommend to use, because that's the average of what most of our kids are sending in. And that's a score that we would most likely to admit. And so if you are given the option to submit a test score or not, be strategic. Look at the school's middle 50% and let that be your guide as to whether to go test optional or not. But don't look at it as a ding or something against your application. It's really to your benefit. And a lot of schools that went test optional due to COVID, we're still assessing the implications of doing that on retention, on success rate. And so we're studying, for the past two years now that we've been test optional, what does it look like for our retention rates? What is it looking for our graduation rates? And so we're still assessing the impact of that. So I do foresee some of us going back to requiring those exams, but there are some school systems that are not losing them at all. And so it really is a regional thing, a state by state thing, a school by school thing. And it's really important to know for all the schools that you're interested in, what it means for that institution.
Yeah. To piggyback off of that, I will say Wake Forest University, not that I'm shouting them out in any way, shape, or form, but Wake Forest University has been test optional. I think they're one of the, they've been one of the schools that's been test optional the longest out of schools that are in their, out of their partner schools that are similar to them. And one of the things that they will say is, it's hard to unsee information that has been sent in, right? So hesitate on submitting scores before you know what they are. And if you have a score that you're super proud of, send it in if you feel like it's going to help. That's the purpose of it being test optional. If it will help your application based on your research, submit it. If it is not going to help, or if you are unsure in any way, shape, or form, keep that score to yourself. Because like Antonio said, it is not going to hurt you if you don't submit it to a test optional school. I will caution you, please make sure you read and do your research. If a school is test optional for admission, make sure that they are also test optional for their merit scholarships. Because some schools will not require for you to submit a test score for admission, but then may turn around and say, if you want to be considered for merit scholarships, you need to submit something. And so just be careful in doing that. And you can trust the school. When the school says they're test optional, they're test optional. One of the things that we noticed in our process is a school like MIT, MIT was test optional during COVID because they knew that, some people could take tests and some people couldn't in their state. They have gone back to requiring test scores. So that's an institution that said, you know what, it's important for us to ensure that students are successful and we can retain them. And we know one of the clearest factors for us to be able to do that is to see how well they perform in math and science on their standardized testing. And so they require test scores. So I encourage you to do your research.
Well, thank you all for sticking around for the questions, and thank you all for being a part of this session. This session is brought to you by SACAC, the Southern Association of College Admissions Counseling. Both Starr and I are proud members of SACAC, and I see Lucy joining us here. Lucy, did you have any comments?
I was going to add a big thank you to the two of you for being our speakers tonight and sharing all of your wisdom. And also thank you to everybody who was able to come tonight to hear this wisdom. In the chat, I'm going to put the link to from the SACAC page, more information about additional college admission workshops that are coming up. There's one actually specifically on financial aid. I know you all have a lot of questions about that. So that's coming up in November, and there are more planned throughout the year. So please check those out. There are also going to be some in-person workshops happening in different states throughout the SACAC region. So be on the lookout for that as well. But again, we're really grateful that you could be here with us tonight, both to our panelists as well as to our attendees. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.